Hey everyone, Mitch coming in for the Command Score Studio. Welcome to the show. So, on today's episode, I am going to be breaking down all of the rares and mythics from the Foundation set, as well as the Foundation's Jumpstart, or whatever in the world that's called. And I'm going to be telling you what are new staples, what are trash cards that you maybe be avoiding, and everything in between. Let's jump into it now. Quickly, I do want to say that when it comes to becoming a staple, that is an incredibly high bar. I'm not just talking about a very powerful card. I'm talking about a very powerful card that has a lot of applications basically everywhere, essentially. Not just like for a specific type of strategy or a specific deck. Again, powerful cards. We've got a lot of them in this set. One that I will start off with, and this is just whatever order that Moxfield put this in. I believe it's like based off of mythics, and I think it's name that first, and then it goes rares. Okay, so we'll go with that. Bloodthirsty Conqueror. A 5/5 Vampire Knight with Flying and Death Touch for 5 mana in black. Whenever an opponent loses life, you gain that much life. Now, this is the type of card that is already kind of not problematic to talk about first, but it kind of makes it tough to decide because this is an incredibly powerful card. This is a card that could be considered a staple as much as Exquisite Blood is basically. Again, this is one where, yeah, opponents lose life, you gain life. It's Commander, you're going to have a lot of opponents. They're going to lose life here, there, and everywhere for any different reason. This also combos with a ham sandwich. That being said, like, is it a card that if you just are playing a black deck, you just chuck into basically every black deck? No, and that's kind of where I draw the line when it comes to staples. It's incredibly hard to break into that. It doesn't happen all that often. I mean, every set will get a staple or two probably these days, but it doesn't happen all the time. So let's just start with this one. Again, a very tough decision. I think it's a very powerful card. It's above a solid card. Like, solid is basically like, yeah, oh yeah, you can definitely include that next. This is like, if this hits the table, it is going to get a ton of attention. All right, moving on. Shandra, Flame Shaper. 6 starting loyalty Shandra for 7 mana and red. Add 3 red, exile top 3 cards of your library, choose 1, you may play a card this turn, +1 create tokens, copy of target creature you control, except that it has haste at the beginning of the end step, sacrifice it, -4, 8 damage divided as you choose among any number of target creatures and or planeswalkers. I think even in, oh goodness, even in like, you know, like planeswalker specific decks, this might have a hard time making the cut. I mean, its mana value is quite high. It doesn't really have like an ultimate that's like, oh yeah, I'm just going to win the game right here and there. Whoops, there, bump that. But in the actual abilities, like that first one is nice. Like, okay, I get some extra mana. I get 3 cards off the top of my library. I get 1 to play this turn. So just 1. That being said, like, yeah, the copying creatures, that's not something necessarily Planeswalker decks want to do. And outside of Planeswalker decks, this doesn't really have all that much of a home, it wouldn't seem. It's a high mana value for not that giant of a payoff. So, yeah, I think, oh, goodness, it's tough to put anything, again, when it comes to, oh, we're going to start with the trash card. Sorry, Chandra fans out there and Planeswalker fans out there. I just don't think this one's quite up to snuff. I don't think it's even situational, really. I think it's more of a trash card. Like, again, like the kinds of decks that you might want to consider this, it just probably won't make the cut even for those specific decks. Like, again, like, hey, like, oh, I'm playing things from exile. I'm getting benefits like that, like Prosper type strategies. Like, yeah, that's a high converted mana cost to like, oh, okay, cool. Top 3, I get 1 card, and I get some mana for it. And it's a Planeswalker, so it's more easily removable. Yeah, I'm going to go with the trash card for now. Maybe I'll adjust that. I reserve the right to change these, okay? Herald of Eternal Dawn, a 6/6 angel for 7 mana and white, flash flying. You can't lose the game. Your opponents can't win the game. This is a very cool card. This is a card that, yeah, I mean, can definitely change up a game in a very, very big way. It's one that, again, you have to keep in mind with these, like, the pips matter. The pips do matter for certain types of strategies out there. I mean, if you are running a deck that, yeah, I mean, has 3+ colors, 3 pips is a decent amount to actually get to, and you need to kind of keep that in mind. It is a really cool card. It's like Platinum Angel, but bigger, and again, you can flash it in for that, hey, oh yeah, you thought you were going to take me out, and now you didn't. It's a very cool card, powerful when in certain situations, I would say, and again, those pips just kind of take it down a little bit in the rankings for me. It is definitely not a trash card in my opinion. I'm going to say it's more of a situational card because, yeah, I mean, kind of like Platinum Angel, it's not for every single deck out there. The decks that want it love it. It's more relevant than Platinum Angel, I would say, when it comes to, again, Flash Flying 6/6 for 7 mana, but it is less relevant when it comes to, okay, yeah, specific mana cost right there with those 3 pips. Next up, Kaito, Cunning, Infiltrator, 3 starting loyalty Kaito for 3 mana in blue. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, put a loyalty counter on it. +1 up to 1 target creature you control. Can't be blocked this turn. Draw a card, discard a card. -2, create a 2/1 blue ninja creature token. -9, you get an emblem with whenever a player casts a spell, you create a 2/1 blue ninja creature token. Planeswalkers themselves typically are, I usually lean towards situational in Commander because, I mean, even the most powerful Planeswalkers of all time, like Jace the Mind Sculptor, that's not like a staple. No Planeswalkers are basically staples, and yeah, so like they're kind of just pushing to get to powerful cards. This one is pretty specific in what types of decks want it. Like, hey, okay, if you've got a deck that has a bunch of, flying men type strategy, a bunch of low to the ground evasive creatures, can I utilize this effectively? Absolutely. For other decks out there, like, oh, yeah, maybe not. So I do think this one's probably a bit more situational. But again, this is just all my opinion. Your opinions might differ, and I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. And yeah, I have a different perspective than many on Planeswalkers, and I tend to value them a bit less for the most part. Unless they have, like, static effects that are just like, hey, no one can draw cards, and then you just win the game by wheeling. Yeah, Narset. Anyways, next up. Not that I value Narset more, just I don't play that one, but it is incredibly powerful. Okay, moving on. Quilled Great Worm. Speaking of incredibly powerful, a 7/7 worm with trample for 6 mana in green. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage during your turn, put that many counters on it. Whenever you cast this card from your graveyard you may cast this card from your graveyard by moving 6 counters from among creatures you control, instead of paying its other cost. I mean, this is a kind of slam dunk type card. It is, I mean, again, the thing with like a staple is really, really hard to actually get to. This is not one that you just chuck in any kind of a deck out there. It is one that is incredibly powerful where literally, again, when your creatures are doing any kind of combat damage on your turn, so whether that's hitting a player or hitting another creature, they are growing, they are getting a ton of counters, and obviously counter synergies work really well with this. And you can also just keep getting this back, and it's a 7/7 trampler for 6 mana that does all that. It's pretty crazy. I'd say overall, and sorry, the art on some of these is slightly different, so just, yeah, there you go. Keep that in mind. But there you go. I think this is a powerful card. I think that this is one that, again, is definitely game-changing. When it comes into play, your opponents have to pay attention to it. It's not one that you just chuck in any kind of a green deck, though, and say, yeah, that's exactly what I need it for. It is just a very, very, very good card. Next up, Rite of the Dragoncaller, an enchantment for 6 mana in red. Whenever you cast an instant resource spell, create a 5/5 red dragon creature token with flying. Yeah, I mean, this is a very, very spicy card. This is a card that's kind of like Tallrand, but hey, bigger creatures. So, and it's also an enchantment, obviously. Enchantments, in my opinion, are the most durable type of card out there for the most part when it comes to surviving, board wipes or, target removal. Typically, creatures, I say, are the weakest when it comes to that. I guess lands are the strongest because people don't destroy lands, but still, okay. Enchantments, though, it's going to stick around more than, say, like a Tallrand for the most part. And then also, yeah, this one says, hey, you get some giant creatures. Those 2/2 flyers are nice, like with a Tallrand type thing, but like 5/5 flyers, that's huge just for any instant or sorcery. That being said, again, it does cost 6 to get out, which is quite a good amount. This one to me is like, it's like between solid and powerful, but it's maybe I'm just trying to fill the gap right now with the because nothing's there yet. But let's go with, if I could click this properly. There we go. Let's go with a solid card. And I'm not sure why I selected that. Let's see if I can get out of that too. There we go. Look, we got it. Okay, so Rite of the Dragoncaller, I think, I mean, it's something between solid and powerful. It's like a game-ending type card, potentially, once it's in play. Okay, maybe I'm going to move up to a powerful card right now, okay? That one's kind of like a, yeah, B+. I mean, or I guess this would be A. S down to A. This would be an A-/B+ for most situations. Okay, next up. Sire of 7 deaths, if I could talk. 7/7 Eldrazi for 7 mana with 7 keywords. First strike, vigilance, menace, trample, reach, lifelink, ward, pay 7 life. I think the term for this kind of a card is French vanilla, right? Because a vanilla creature is like a 3/3 for 4 mana. So no text on it except for flavor text. This is only keywords on it, essentially. So yeah, French vanilla, I believe, is the term. This is a good card. This is a card where it's like, yeah, I mean, if you're looking for like a 7 power creature for 7 mana that does a lot of things and can get through in combat, can be hard to deal with. It's not something you're necessarily going to like just build around entirely. It is something that works great for certain strategies again. I think this one is probably more so just like solid card. I wouldn't be surprised to see it in a deck just in general. Like, oh yeah, okay, that's a card I need to pay attention to on the field. But it's not one it's like, oh, okay, like it's obviously not hard to cast. It is just 7 mana. I mean, the amount of mana, but it's not like mana pips when it comes to that, like the Angel we talked about earlier. I think it's a solid card overall. It's not quite to that level of the ones above it where it's like, oh yeah, those are just like game-changing cards where, oh yeah, cool, now you drain whenever, or you gain life whenever players lose life. You get counters on all your creatures. You get an absurd amount of dragons in play. So yeah, this is something you need to pay attention to, but it's not something that, again, just like changes the entire dynamics of the game. And it's definitely not something that's like, oh yeah, it's an auto include in every deck. Next up, Sphinx of Forgotten Lore. A 3/3 Sphinx with flash and flying for 4 mana in blue. Whenever this creature attacks, target instant source card in your graveyard gains flashback until a turn. The flashback cost equal to that card's mana cost. This one, I would say, it's definitely not a trash card. It is, I mean, it's solid, again, which is kind of just weird these days when you've got like, oh, a 3/3 flash flyer for 4 mana. Back in the day, it'd be like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. These days, it's like, okay, it's got to do a lot of other things for that. This one, I'd say, is a bit more situational. It's like, okay, like I need to really care about certain cards in my graveyard, getting instant sorceries in my graveyard that I want to recast, essentially. Probably some high-value cards there. And also, like, this is a creature as well. So, like, how much do I want to invest in creatures if I'm going, like, Spellslinger / big spells / big mana / creatures? It's more situational, in my opinion. Next up, Twin Flame Tyrant. A 3/5 dragon with flying for 5 mana in red. If a source you control deal damage to an opponent or a permanent opponent controls, it deals double that damage instead. This one, again, just like they keep making a lot of these, but damage doublers, damage triplers have definitely upped in number over the past couple of years. This has a relevant creature type as well. It's definitely not like a chuck it in every single red deck, but it's a very good card for a good amount of red decks out there, I would say. Again, any ones that really care about dealing damage, you double all of that up, which is pretty crazy. Yeah, I mean, overall, I just say that this one is on a different level than the Eldrazi I talked about. This is a powerful card. It is one that, again, it changes the dynamics of the game when it's in play. It's not a staple, but it is a very, very, very powerful card. And when I say not a staple, again, I don't mean like it's not a staple for dragons. It definitely can be a staple for dragons. It's just like, okay, not every deck is a dragon deck. Moving on, Valkyries Call. An enchantment for 5 mana in white. Whenever a non-token, non-angel creature you control dies, return that card to the battlefield. Under its own control, they counter on it. And it's flying as angel to other types. This is a card that, again, in my opinion, I mean, it's probably in between like a solid card and a powerful card. It is basically just like, if for a non-angel deck out there, this is basically like a free reanimation for a creature in a way. It's like, cool, all of a sudden you took out my army. Okay, they all come back automatically. They're slightly larger and they have flying. There's probably some combos that you can utilize with it as well. Oh, okay. I mean, it is, again, it is kind of in between powerful and solid, in my opinion. Like, it's, okay. The dynamics of the game change quite a bit. So we're going to go with a powerful card. Maybe I'm overvaluing some of these, undervaluing others. So my apologies on that. But again, everyone's got different opinions on this kind of thing, and I'd love to hear from you on your opinions. And I believe that is all the mythics. So let's jump down into the rares if I can scroll well enough. Here we go. First up, Abyssal Harvester. A 3/2 Demon Warlock for 3 mana in black. Tap, exile target creature card from a graveyard that was put there this turn. Create a token that's a copy of it, except it's a nightmare to other types. Then exile all other nightmare tokens you control. Now, the thing is with this one is that it probably would be a bit more situational, but it does allow you to get any card from any graveyard. Again, target creature from a graveyard. It has to be put there this turn, but again, it doesn't mean just yours. So it's not like dependent on, oh, yeah, like, hey, a creature that I milled or a creature that I sacrificed or whatever. You don't have to be dependent upon your own army. You can be dependent upon opponents' creatures dying too. Obviously, there's some things that you can do with it and like more specific strategies out there. We're like, oh, okay, I could populate that token. I could do this or that or this or that. Or some untap effects. That being said, if you just like threw this in a black deck, like would that make sense? Probably. I would think that it would probably make sense. So I think overall, I mean, it's in between situational and solid, but I'd probably lean more toward solid. So there you go. Okay, next up. Anthem of Champions. Here we go. An enchantment for 2 mana in Selesnya. Creatures you control get +1/+1. Oh, okay. This is a... Okay. When it comes to Anthems, this is a card that is literally just, yeah, above many other ones. I mean, we've gotten other great ones these days that are like 2 mana, whatever that one is from Lord of the Rings, essentially. It's like, hey, legendary is +2/+1 or whatever it is. Low to the ground, Anthems. Again, we used to have Anthems at 3 mana. Now we're getting Anthems at 2 mana. And the only difference with this one is it's just a specific mana value, obviously, when it comes to actually playing it. Though the other ones have, pips as well. But this is multicolor, obviously. So it is just like a strictly better aura Anthem than some other Anthems out there. So it's like automatically replacing those. It is, and again, Anthems just don't see play like in every single kind of deck, obviously. But for the decks that they do see play, this is a powerful card, I would say, because it is one, I mean, that's probably more so. Here's the thing. It's probably more so between like solid and powerful because of just like what it does impacts the game. Absolutely. And the decks that want it really want it. But like, is it one that's just going to get like the entire attention of the table? Potentially. No, it's just kind of like just kind of showing off like power creep in Magic and where we're at with Anthems now versus where we were back in the day. 2 mana versus 3 mana for the exact same effect. All right, next up. Archmage of Runes, a 3/6 giant wizard for 5 mana in blue. Instant source spells you cast cost once to cast. Whenever you cast an instant source spell, draw a card. So this is kind of like a combination of like Goblin Electromancer-ish plus, what's that, Archmage Emeritus. Basically, I mean, not including the, whenever you're copying instant sorceries, drawing cards, but still. It's a lot of card draw, and it is cost reduction, both of which are very good things. It is on a creature, which of course is easier to deal with, but both things are very powerful. Oh my gosh. Okay. Yeah, there's a lot of tough decisions with this when it comes to like cards, especially between like solid and powerful, I would say. This is probably in the, let's go with powerful. The amount of cards you can draw for the right deck out there, I think it's a pretty powerful card. Maybe I'll move it down to solid. It's a very good card, obviously, but we shall see. Okay. Ashr Animist, a 4/4 Lizard Druid for 4 mana in Gruul Trample. Whenever this creature attacks, the other target creature you control gains trample and gets +X/+X to turn. X is this creature's power. This one, I mean, it's nice for a very specific kind of deck, again, that like cares about this getting larger potentially and pumping another creature and that creature getting larger. So it's like, it's incredibly, it is situational. I don't think it's as bad as, like, no offense to Shandra, but I don't think it's that bad, but it's definitely like, it's pretty specific. It's very specific on what it wants to do. So I think there's a pretty high bar for a card to be, again, a staple, and also for a card to be trash, in my opinion. So I think Ashr Animist, it is for specific decks. It's pretty good for those decks. I mean, you do got to send it into, like, danger as well. Ah, my goodness. Okay, I'm going to move you down to trash card. No. Okay, we're going to keep you situational, all right? Trash I'll reserve for just the worst of the worst, in my opinion. Okay, next up. Banner of Kinship, an artifact for 5. As this artifact enters, choose a creature type. This artifact enters with a fellowship counter on it for each creature you control of the chosen type. Creatures you control of the chosen type get +1 for each fellowship counter on this artifact. Okay, for an actual, for a tribal deck, this is a slam dunk for the vast majority of tribal decks out there. So it is a tribal deck staple specifically, but again, like, is it just something you chuck into every deck? And again, I think the next card, not to spoil it, I'll actually kind of show off what I think a staple is in that kind of level, and maybe I should have started there. This is a card that is incredibly powerful. Yes, this is a card that is a staple in tribal decks. It's not a card that you obviously chuck into anything that is not a tribal deck, though. It's not a card that will show up in the top 100 on EDH Rec. Unless there's just that many tribal decks out there that utilize it, and maybe it will, but I don't think so. But this is a card that, again, like, for the vast majority of tribal decks out there that go wide, yeah, you want this in the deck, and you just chuck this in, and it's going to pump your team a ton. Okay. Next up, Blasphemous Edict. I'm just going to kind of spoil this one right now, and I already kind of did. This is a staple. This is just simply a staple. This is going to be one of the most played cards out of the set, I believe, in Commander, just moving forward. Probably the most played card out of the set. This is basically Blasphemous Act, but in black. In some ways it's better, in some ways it's worse. Sorcery for 5 mana in black, and sorry again for the different art on this one. You may play black rather than pay this spell's mana cost if there are 13 more creatures on the battlefield. Each player sacrifices 13 creatures of their choice. My goodness. Okay, so this again is basically a 1 mana Wrath in black. Like, yeah, that's incredibly powerful. Like, it is, like, is it Toxic Deluge good? Probably not to that level, because again, like, Toxic Deluge you always can cast for 3. Like, that is always a low to the ground, Wrath effect, essentially. You can also adjust what you want with that one. Again, if you want to make it a one-sided board wipe, if you've got some decently sized creatures out there, congratulations, you can do that. This one is not adjustable. That being said, obviously, you can take more advantage of sacrificing those creatures if you've got ways to maybe get them back, creatures you actually want to sacrifice, or if you literally just have more than 13 creatures, which most opponents do not. So, you know, and I guess the other difference in this and Blastos Act is like Blastos Act can just cost, maybe it doesn't cost just 1 mana sometimes. If it's like, oh, there's like only so many creatures on the battlefield, this costs 2 or 3. This is dependent on there being a good amount of creatures on the battlefield for you to do so. So that's going to happen most of the time. And 5 mana isn't ridiculous either for everyone sacrificing 13 creatures. Like Butter and Blood, right? I think that's the card, is like 1 mana less, and everyone sacrifices 2. And this just jumps up to 13. So yeah, this is a staple. This is a card that, not that it's like, it's not impossible to argue against not using it in a deck that's black, but it's like up there. It's up there as a card that's like, yeah, you should be considering this one if you have the budget for it, if you already have it, if you're going to proxy it or whatnot. Like, it is one that you just should be considering because it is that level of power, that level of application to decks out there. So, yeah, it's, in my opinion, probably, unless I'm forgetting one, probably the second best Black Wrath out there. I mean, mono black. Yeah, so outside of Toxic Deluge, I don't think it's quite to that level, but it is up there compared to other ones. So, there you go. Next up, Celestial Armor. Artifact equipment for 3 mana in white. Flash. When this equipment enters attached to our creature you control, the creature gains hexproof indestructible out of turn, +2/+0 flying, equipped for 4 mana. Yeah, this one is a solid card. This is one that's like, oh, okay, cool. Like, I get this in play. I save my, most likely, commander. You know, hexproof indestructible, good to save from nearly anything, except for Blasphemous Edict, or whatever that one was, Pact. Yeah, basically, this saves from many things. Again, it could be a trick play. Basically, okay, cool, yeah. Throw this on my commander real quick. Also, +2/+0 flying is relevant. But yeah, that just like, you're getting most of the value out of the turn that you play it, because it's just that turn that they're hexproof indestructible. After that, +2/+0 and flying, like equip 4, that is a really high cost. I'd say this is very situational. It's good like as a protection spell slash, you know, solid-ish card in an equipment deck, but it's pretty specific on what kind of decks want it. Next up, Crystal Barricade, a 0/4 wall for 2 mana in white. Defender, you have hexproof. Prevent all non-combat damage to be dealt to other creatures you control. I mean, this is, again, very, in my opinion, situational. It's for specific decks out there that, like, if you have a bunch of, like, you know, damage-based board wipes yourself and you want to save your team, think like Firesong Sunspeaker-ish. Cool. Or if for some reason that you really care about protecting yourself with hexproof, or if you have a defender deck, it's very situational. It's not a bad card. It's not one that's like, oh, yeah, there's, like, very few decks ever that would utilize this. It just is incredibly situational on what kind of decks want it, I guess. And maybe there's a distinction between that. Okay. Curator of Destinies. A 5/5 Sphinx that can't be countered. Flying. 6 mana in blue. When this creature enters, look at the top 5 cards of your library and separate them into a face-down pile, face-up pile, and opponent chooses one of those piles. Put that pile in your hand, the other in your graveyard. ETB, again, you're going to be getting most likely 2 or 3 cards is probably what's going to be happening on this. It can't be countered. It's a 5/5 flyer for 6 mana. That's overall pretty solid. It is a card that, yeah, is quite interesting because obviously, like, for Blink decks specifically, and there's a good amount out there, like, you can very easily use and abuse this. There's also, like, some graveyard synergies with it, too, and just fun to mess with your opponents. I think overall, it is a pretty solid card because I would not be surprised to see this, like, in a non-Sphinx deck and a non-Blink deck as well. Like, they just play it. They've got a decent threat on the board as a 5/5 flyer. And also, I mean, they're guaranteed to be able to play because it can't be countered, which is this nice throw-in right there. But also, yeah, some good card advantage, card selection right there. I guess it's your opponent kind of choosing, but you can mess with that, which is quite fun. Okay. Drake Hatcher, a 1/3 human wizard with Vigilance Prowess for 2 mana in blue. This creature deals combat damage to a player. Put that many incubation counters on it. Move 3 incubation counters from it. Create a 2/2 blue Drake creature stone with flying. This is a very cool design. This is one of my favorite designs from the set, I think, because there's a lot of layers to it, and I like everything that works with it. This, I mean, you do need, unfortunately, a pretty specific kind of deck. This is not one where, again, like that Sphinx I just talked about, where it's like, oh yeah, okay, it's a big body. It's a, you know, flyer. It also is, you know, a good card advantage source. This is like, okay, if I've got the right strategy around this, I could get a lot of value out of this. If I don't, then I'm like, okay, I swing with a 1/3. I hit you. Cool, I get 1 incubation counter on it. just wait until I get through 2 more times. Like, obviously, like if you have this in a deck that's about, you know, casting a bunch of non-creature spells, great. If you've got other ways to pump it, great. If you've got proliferate effects, great. It is more situational, I would say, than the cards that we are seeing in the solid card area, though, okay? Next up, Dropkick Bomber. A 2/3 Goblin Warrior for 3 mana in red. Other goblins you control get +1/+1. Until end of turn, another target goblin you control gains flying. And whenever this creature deals combat damage, sacrifice it. I mean, this is a very good card for Goblin Tribal specifically. Outside of Goblin Tribal specifically, this is a card that just would not see play, really. Because, again, you're not pumping anything else. And another target goblin. If you don't have another goblin, you're not utilizing that other ability. So I'd say this one is pretty situational, so let's throw that one there. Next up, Elan of Astral wins. A 2/4 enchantment creature spirit for vigilance with vigilance for 3 mana and white. Constellation, and whenever it or another enchantment you control enters 2-star creature control, until end of turn, that creature has base power toughness 4/4 and gains flying. This one's very specific in what it wants to do again. Like, this is like, okay, Enchantress deck, cool. But not just that. Like, this isn't like other kind of Constellation cards, which are like Elan of Blossoms, where it's like, oh yeah, just chuck that in literally any Enchantress deck, because that one, yeah, I mean, gives you value every single time. This one's like, oh, okay, cool, I guess I could make this into a 4/4 flyer if I don't have any other creatures on the battlefield. And I kind of have to like have a go wide Enchantress strategy, go wide creatures with Enchantress strategy, and that's a bit specific. So I'm going to say this one is pretty situational. In fact, very, very, very situational. Okay, next up, Electro Duplicate. This is a source for 3 mana in red. Create a token that's copy of target creature you control, except that it has haste, and at the beginning of the end step, sacrifice this token. Flashback for 4. This one is a solid card. Again, it is like, it's basically like Heat Shimmer, but better because you can flash it back again. So this one is a card that I would say is probably a solid card level. This is a card, and again, sorry for the different art on this one. This is a card where, yeah, you are going to be able to make an extra copy of your best creature on the board and swing out with it, and then do that again later. And also really take advantage of any ETBs you might have, LTBs you might have. If your commander has a great ETB or LTB, take advantage of that by copying it. So there's some cool things that you can do this one. I would say it's a more solid card. Again, it's not that, like, you know, I would be surprised to see it like in a deck that has red, that it's like a decent amount of just creatures, or a commander that, you know, you want to get a copy of for some reason, or another ETB, LTB, whatever. Okay, Exemplar of Light. 3/3 Angel of Flying for 4 mana in white. Whenever you gain life, put a counter on this creature. Whenever you put one or more counters on this creature, draw a card. Triggers only once each turn. This is a very solid card for specific strategies out there. Again, either life gain or +1 counter synergies. You're getting to draw a lot of cards with this. Again, triggering once each turn. It's every single turn, basically. This is, I mean, you do need any kind of components to actually work with this, though. Obviously, again, for those specific kinds of strategies, you have to have either life gain or counters synergies, or this just does not function. So I would say then it is a very, very good card. It is a card that is situational for those types of strategies, though. Yeah, maybe this, that could move up to solid, though, just because there are a lot of different synergies, but okay. We're going to stick with that. All right. Frontline Heroism, an enchantment for 3 mana in red. Whenever it enters, create a 1/1 red soldier creature token with haste. Whenever you cast a spell, it targets only a single creature you control. Create a 1/1 red soldier creature token with haste. Then copy that spell. Then copy targets the token. This is incredibly specific and incredibly situational. And yeah, like, okay, cast the target. Yeah, you get to copy that. Like, it is very incredibly situational. I wouldn't say it's a trash card. I'd say that it's a card that is just like very specific at what it wants to do. Like, if you're in a heroic deck, there you go. It is a very specific type of deck that out there that might want to utilize this. More specific than others even. All right, Generous Pup next up. 2/2 dog for 2 mana in white. Vigilance. Whenever one or more counters are put on it, they put a counter on each other creature you control. Its ability triggers only once each turn. A very good card for +1 counter synergies. It's a card that doesn't have a ton of application outside of that, obviously, because, yeah, it's all about +1 counter synergies, so do that. Is this like Hydroid Crassus? Is that the one? I'm trying to think of the one that's... There's one that, like, it distributes counters whenever it evolves, but kind of similar to that. Yeah, okay, moving on. Okay, High Fay Trickster, a 4/2 Fairy Wizard for 4 mana in blue. Flash, flying, you may cast spells as though they had flash. This is a card that, yeah, is incredibly powerful, and, It might. I mean, I don't think it's going to be... I don't think it's going to be on the same level as the Blasphemous card, but I think it's up there as a staple. This is basically Vedalken Orrery, but on a creature. And again, it being a 4/2 flyer with flash is relevant. I would say Vedalken Orrery is better because, I mean, you can't flash Vedalken Orrery in, but again, artifacts typically are more difficult to deal with than creatures. So there you go. Just at a base level, this is more easy to deal with. It's the same amount of mana, and you could flash it in, though. It has flying, which is quite nice. But yeah, being able to just cast spells as they have flash, that is a huge thing that can apply to a lot of situations. Again, would I be surprised to see this in, like, a lot of blue decks out there? No, not at all. Just kind of like I'm not surprised to see Vedalken Orrery in the decks that it is. It is a card that... yeah, I mean, it just changes the game, changes the dynamics of the game. You being able to cast things at instant speed, a lot of decks can utilize a function like that. So I would say that this is probably on the staple level. I mean, it's like, again, it's like if you put like different tiers like within each tier, like the Blasphemous card is above this, but still it's very close. Okay, High Society Hunter, a 5/3 Vampire Noble for 5 mana in black. Whenever this creature attacks, you may create a sacrifice a creature. If you do, put a counter on this creature. Whenever another non-zone creature dies, draw a card. Yeah, this is a very, very, very powerful card, in my opinion. This is one that can apply to a lot of decks and a lot of strategies out there. And even if you don't have, like, let's say an Aristocrat-style strategy, which is like the main home for this creature, I believe, which is amazing card for that strategy because it gives you a like mini sacrifice outlet for it, and not like a repeatable one, but one that you can do each turn, like not just like, hey, sacrifice Viserys here. That being said, yeah, being able to just draw a card every single time any non-token creature dies, and keep in mind, this is another non-token creature dies, that includes your opponents as well. So just having a pretty good body in play, again, 5/3 flyer for 5 mana, that also just gains you card advantage throughout the game just by the game happening, essentially. And yeah, if you've got a certain strategy specifically that works with this, then great. And also if you've got a vampire deck, great, cool. It's a very, very, very solid card. All right, next up, Homunculus Horde. A 2/2 Homunculus for 4 mana in blue. Whenever you draw your second card each turn, create a token that's a copy of this creature. This one is an interesting one. This is one where it is, I mean, so Scoot Swarm is an absurdly powerful card. That one, it's a bit easier to use and abuse Scoot Swarm because it can all be on the same turn. This cannot be on the same turn, and also, I mean, just inherently in how it works. Scoot Swarm is with landfall. Basically, this one is with second card drawing, which obviously can only happen once each turn. It can happen 4 times with each trip on the table, though, because it can happen on each player's turn, not just your own. You do need a specific deck built around that, but like literally even if you are just drawing an extra card in your turn from this thing or another thing, like you're in blue, you've got ways to draw, right? Even if it's just on your turn, outside the first draw you have, you draw something else and you double this up, that's incredibly powerful. Just doubling every single one of your turns is still powerful. Situationally, if you build around this and you literally just like, okay, yeah, with each stripper on the table, I'm drawing 2 cards every turn, because I've got, you know, like, let's say looting effects, like Merfolk Looter type effects, make it a little easier to do that, or draw whenever this happens, or just, you know, like Brainstorm type effects, which are easy to cast and draw cards. Yeah, I would say this one is probably overall a solid card, because, yeah, you could just throw it in a good amount of blue decks out there, because blue decks typically will have good draw as well. Even if you're just drawing on your turn, or occasionally on opponent's turns to hit that 2 mark, you can go really, really wide, really, really fast with this, and just kind of take over the game. All right, next up. Layline Ax, an equipment for 4 mana. If it's in your opening hand, you may begin the game with it on the battlefield. Equip 3, equip creature is ++1, double strike, and trample. Basically a potentially free equipment just to get in play right away, which is pretty crazy to see, which is kind of cool. I mean, like, Laylines, I never expected them to kind of branch out. I don't know why, outside of just like the normal, like, hey, Laylines are 4 mana, and, or not 4 always, but they are in, you know, enchantments only, basically. This, like, oh, okay, cool, Layline, but it's an equipment. So yeah, do some pretty crazy things with that. Double strike and trample are both very, very relevant. The Fire Sugar sees a ton of play in a lot of decks. Yeah, I mean, I'd say like overall it's a good card. It's less situational than other cards. It's not quite to the powerful card level. Obviously, if you hit opening hand, that's just quite nice. So there you go. Okay. Lunar Insight, a source for 3 mana and blue. Draw a card for each different mana value among non-land permanents you control. This is a card that I mean, if it was, say, instant speed for 1 mana more, it would probably see 1 or more play, but because it's sorcery, that really holds it back, and also it is very specific on what kinds of decks want it. You need to make sure that your deck has like a decently wide variety of permanents that have different mana values. Like outside of that, if you just have like a couple different, you're not gonna be like, oh, okay, cool, yeah, I really care about casting this 3 mana sorcery to draw 2, maybe 3. Like, yeah, you need to make sure that you have a wide variety of cards. And then also, again, the fact that this is sorcery speed means you need to dedicate resources to it on your turn versus a lot of other card draw in blue is, hey, instant speed, just like hold things up. Yeah, so this is probably a very situational card. Like certain decks will love it because if you have, again, a lot of different mana values, if you're incentivized to do so, great. If not, then it's like, oh, okay, maybe sometimes it'll draw me some cards, but I have to, again, dedicate to it early. Next up, Mossborn Hydra, a 0/0 elemental Hydra, trample for 3 mana in green. This creature enters with a counter on it. Landfall, whenever a land you control enters, double the number of counters on this creature. I mean, this is a card where, oh, goodness gracious, like this is, again, like in between like solid and powerful in my opinion. Like I could imagine just seeing this like in literally any green deck out there because green decks have land ramp. That's just like what green decks do. And then just also they'll play like an Evolving Wilds every now and then or another fetch land. And there you go. You get to double it again. This can just become just like a giant creature on its own. And if your opponents don't deal with it, it's going to destroy them. Like that's just going to happen. It's exponential growth, again, with doubling the number of counters. It is one that's like not like changing the game entirely when it comes down though, where opponents are like, yeah, that needs to go right away. Like they can get, I mean, I guess at some point, depends how quick you do it. Okay, this one is, again, like, it's like a solid plus, powerful minus. We're going to go with it there. It might be a card that should just be in that powerful card range, but for now, I'm going to put it in the solid. Okay, 9 Lives Familiar. A 1/1 cat for 3 mana in black. This creature enters with 8 revival counters on it. If you cast it, when this creature dies, if it has a revival counter on it, return to the battlefield with 1 fewer revival counter on it, begin next end step. This is a card that cannot die. I mean, it takes a long time to die. If you've got proliferate effects, it probably will never die. Opponents will have to exile it or bounce it away and then just replay it. But yeah, like, this is something that just, like, literally comes back into play again and again and again and again and again and again and again. It is, you could consider it situational, but also I wouldn't just be surprised to see it in a deck and just be like, all right, it came back. What? It came back. What? It came back. Oh, maybe it is a bit more situational. Like, it's a very powerful card for the right decks. Again, like, for an aristocrat style deck, this is just like, oh, okay, cool. You can sacrifice this like 9 times. There you go. Cats have 9 lives, right? So you just like keep sacrificing it and get a lot of value out of it that way. Again, if you have proliferate effects, you can keep it in play. It's probably because I just really like the design that I'm like, I want it to be a solid card, but it's probably more situational. I guess I would be surprised if it was just like mono black deck that's just like, yeah, I just happen to have this in here, and it's like, oh, okay, I guess it's gonna be annoying that I have to keep killing that, but it's just like, yeah, it's not like the Hydra where it's like, yeah, you just chuck that in a green deck and it's gonna work really well. Next up, Preposterous Proportion, sorcery for 7 mana in green, creature control +10/+10, gain vigilance on turn. This is, again, pretty specific, pretty situational. There are other, you know, like Overrun type effects out there. I think Overrun, like, even probably has a little more value than this one does because this doesn't give you a way to get that damage through. Like, this is a finisher, but not a finisher in a way. In some ways, it's kind of more of a board wipe, just depending on the deck, because you're pumping your creatures and you're swinging, but they're not potentially getting damage through unless they already have some kind of evasion to get them through. The Vigilance is nice. Again, this is a lot of mana, though. Pump 10 +10, pump 10 +10/+10. That's nice. I'd say this is more situational. It's like go wide, but you probably have, you know, maybe another way to give trample or evasion, etc., etc. All right, Raise the Past. Sorcerer, 4 mana in white. Return all creature cards with mana value 2 or less to your grave of the battlefield. This is incredibly specific. This is a card where it's like, yeah, it's amazing for decks that are incredibly low to the ground, maybe self-mill, maybe Reanimator style, where you're just getting a bunch of things out of your graveyard back into play. But again, it's incredibly specific. Creatures only, mana value 2 or less. If you got a lot of those creatures in your deck, if you got a deck built around that, congratulations. It's an amazing reanimation spell, but other than that, not so much. All right, Sandstorm Crasher, a 3/4 Minotaur Berserker Wizard with trample for 4 mana in red. You may exert it as it attacks. What do you do? Create a tap that attacking token that's copied target creature control. Sacrifice being next end step. This is one that, again, in my opinion, is a bit more specific. This is a card that, like, yeah, for the right deck out there that really cares about maybe attack triggers, using and abusing them, great. I mean, you have to exert this to do so, so it's going to be tapped down for another turn. You still got to send this into danger to do so. But yes, you can use and abuse other creatures, ETBs, or just get other big creatures coming into play and, you know, hit even harder. So yeah, populate effects can work well with it too, but yeah. Okay, next up, Scrawling Crawler, a 3/2 Phyrexian construct for 3 mana. At the beginning of your upkeep, each player draws a card. When an opponent draws a card, the player loses 1 life. This is a card that probably would be, I'd probably put it as a solid card if it didn't have that first part. Like, it is a good card. I'm not saying it's not a good card. All these cards are good cards. No offense, Shandra. Yeah, this is a card that is good, but again, like, not every deck out there, in fact, many decks out there do not want to just give opponents card draw. Like, that's just a fact. Like, unless you're in, like, group hug, group slug with this, I guess, really, when it comes to, like, punishing opponents as well, you probably don't want to have a Howling Mine in play, giving opponents card draw. So this is one that I would say is very situational. It's not a trash card. Definitely has a place in some decks out there. In some decks that really love this one again. But yeah, outside of ones that like either want a group slug or group hug. Yeah, and it's like a weird group hug card too, because you're like, I'm giving you cards, but also punishing you. Here's a hug. All right. Scythe Cat Cub, a 2/2 cat for 2 mana in green with trample. Whenever a land you control enters, put a counter on target creature you control. Up the second time this ability resolve this turn, double the number of counters on that creature instead. I mean, it is a good card. Oh, goodness. Okay, so you do need, again, like, unlike the other Hydra, where it's just like any land is a lot of value, again, because it doubles up its own counters immediately. This one's like, okay, I need 2 lands to get the most of that. If I only get 1 land, 1 counter on something's nice, but if I didn't get that, then yeah, like I actually need like dedicated ramp. I need a dedicated landfall deck with this one to really make the most out of it, or I need it to be an ape counters deck as well. So I'd say this one is like less self-sufficient than the Hydra. The Hydra is more of a solid card. I would say Scythe Cat Cub is more of a situational card. Very good in certain types of decks out there. Very good in counter synergies that have a good amount of landfall, or good in landfall synergies in general. Okay, next up. Seer Slicer Goblin, a 2/1 Goblin Warrior for 2 mana in red. Raid at the beginning of your end step. If you attack this turn, create a 1/1 red Goblin creature token. This one is interesting because I think it kind of lives between like situational and solid. Like low to the ground creatures that just make other creatures repeatedly. That's a powerful thing. There are a lot of token strategies out there. This one does have, again, a requirement for attack, but it doesn't have to be it attacking. You don't have to send it into combat. And again, if you're just like literally getting a new token each turn, you can just keep swinging with that one to make another token, and make another token, and make another token. Like, you can just keep doing that. So once you get going, again, this one kind of lives between, I think, situational and solid. I'm going to lean this one toward more actually just solid, though, because just getting a low-to-the-ground creature in play that can make other creatures, there's a lot of decks out there that will want. That also is a very relevant creature type, so there you go. Next up. Knight Squire, a 1/1 Cat Scout for 2 mana in white. Whenever another creature you control enters, get a counter on this creature. As long as this creature has 3 or more counters on it, as flying is a knight and other types. This one, I mean, is a solid card for a go-wide strategy. You can get a lot of value out of it. It is one where, yeah, okay, it can become a threat like the Hydra does, but like it's not like a threat where it's like, oh my gosh, out of nowhere, like it is just gigantic. Like this does take time to get quite large, essentially, for the most part. So I'd say this is a situational card. Yeah, I put that situationally. Okay, next up, we've got Soulstone Sanctuary, and again, sorry for the different art on this one. Land that can tap for a colorless or pay for this land becomes a 3/3 creature with vigilance and all creature types. It's still a land. Here's the thing. Mutavault, this is not, because, and this is something that I made a mistake on before I saw it pointed out, and I hope you don't as well. Like, don't just like go buy this card and like put it in decks. But yes, it's Mutavault. It's not Mutavault because, well, again, it becomes a 3/3 creature. At no point does it say that it is like until end of turn. It does not just become back just into a land. In like one of the main value things of a creature land is that they dodge board wipes, because Commander players aren't playing mass, removal of lands, typically, in a casual setting. So, yeah, they're protected. This is not protected, because this becomes the least protected card type out there. This becomes a creature permanently. So, because of that, again, like, yeah, I mean, like, for incredibly specific, like, changeling decks, you might consider it. Like, if you've got, like, a Lord's Tribal deck, but still you might not, because yeah, you need to just like, okay, this just becomes a creature. Like, I'm going to lose this land at some point, most likely because of a Wrath, and I'm going to be, going down a land, essentially. I'm like de-ramping myself. So I'd say overall, it's a very cool card. It's a really cool design. I think just because of that impact of it staying a creature, that takes away one of the big value propositions of a creature land. Like, the biggest value proposition of a creature land is that literally, well, the biggest one is that it doesn't take up a spot in your deck, really, at all. It's a land. But also that it's protected. This is not protected. It becomes something that is very not protected. Next up, Spinner of Souls. A 4/3 Spirit Spider with Reach for 3 mana and green. Whenever another non-token creature control dies, you may reveal a card to the top of your library to reveal a creature card. With that card in your hand, the rest of the library in a random order. This is a card where I would not be surprised to see this in a lot of decks out there. It is one that is very solid. It is card advantage, like literally every single time one of your non-token creatures dies. It is just, hey, cool. All right, go get another one. Okay, cool. Go get another one. Okay, cool. Go get another one. It's like keeps replacing them. There's, of course, decks that can really take advantage of this even more so, like aristocrat-style strategies out there, or ones that have specific creatures they want to get to, or ones that have creatures, again, like Resummoning Skeleton, they keep getting back out and sacrificing, get back out, sacrifice, to keep getting value every single time. I'd say overall, it's probably a very solid card. It's not quite to the level of these up here. Maybe now I'm looking at it, I might want to move this guy down, but okay, we'll keep it up there for now. That's drawing on instant sorcery casting. It's going to see a lot of play. I don't know. Okay. Next up, Sylvan Scavenging, the last rare or mythic we're going to be talking about. Enchantment for 3 mana and green. At the beginning of your end step, choose 1, put a counter to our creature control, create a 3/3 green raccoon creature token, raccoon creature token if you control a creature power 4 or greater. This one is a good card. If you're just getting that counter each time, that's not all that great. Obviously, you want to be able to make a bunch of creature tokens. It is dependent, but it is, I'd say, more dependent than that goblin we talked about earlier. Maybe I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth then when it comes to that kind of a thing. It's not an enchantment, so it is a bit harder to deal with. You just need, like, one creature, but it is situational. Yeah. It's between the two. It's like a situational / solid card. I am going to lean situational just because of the specificity of that. It's not as easy to hit as, say, the Goblin, where it's just like attack, which you could just do with the token that you just made last turn. Then attack, and then do it again. Okay. I think I'm going to go with it there, but maybe it's more of a solid card. I don't know. Okay. You know what? Actually, okay, I went back and forth on this one, probably more so than other ones. Just in my mind, just kept playing that. I feel like Vedalken Ori has fallen out of kind of like staple consideration, or just like it is a very powerful card. I should probably adjust down Fay Trickster. That's one I will adjust down. Okay, I'm gonna adjust that one down to being a very powerful card. Again, it having flash, it being a flyer, that's nice, and it does change the game. It changes the aspects of the game where it just demands attention, because if you've got things built around it, if you've just got, the ability to play anywhere, your opponents have to respect that, and they also have to look out for that, and they also have to try to find a way to stop you from being able to do that so that you can get your plays in when you're going to be getting your plays in. It's not on the level of Blasphemous. I already kind of mentioned it earlier. It's not on the level of that new staple, Blasphemous Pact. I can never say it's like Blasphemous Edict, yeah. Blasphemous Pact, I believe. But it is a very good card, and I feel a lot better. Okay, I think I feel a lot better about the list, just kind of seeing with that adjusted right there down to a powerful card. So, yeah, let me know in the comments what your thoughts are on my list. I feel pretty good about it. Obviously, there's certain things that I would come in and change, and, move the Goblin down maybe, or move the Raccoon up. That's just what I'm saying, like these kind of ones. But, yeah, there's certain small adjustments I think I would make. I think it's pretty fair to say that, like, most cards in a set should probably be situational. There shouldn't just be broad swaths of cards that can fit into every deck out there, essentially. I feel like Magic is better when it's more specific like that. You're not just getting, like, haymaker after haymaker after haymaker. It's like, yeah, that has to come in my deck now. That has to go in all my decks now. Like, I think it's better when they're more situational. So, yeah, I'm not surprised to see kind of this, like, layout right now. But let me know your thoughts on all this in the comments below. Love to hear from you. In these types of episodes, I love seeing the comments and the discussion that happens there. Constructive criticism, please. I definitely know that some of you are going to, disagree with some of my picks for this, and that's completely fine. Would love to hear your thoughts on which one should move up, which one should move down, and where everything should end up. And with that, this episode is coming to a close, so it's my turn to hear from you. In the comments below, let me know your thoughts are on this episode. And of course, as always, thanks again, and have a good one. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support.